the Federal Reserve put up the Fed funds rate by 25 basis points to what will be a effective Fed funds rate when it's shown by the New York Fed on their website tomorrow morning, 485 basis points. Very interestingly, the summary of economic projections, which was released with the Fed statement, suggests that there's only one more rate hike to come. And that will be a further increase of 25 basis points in the meeting of which occurs on the 2nd and the 3rd of May. I think that might become increasingly important, that meeting, as we go forward. The reason that Fed sentiment has changed from, gee, we need at least 2 more rate hikes at the next meeting and then more after that, which is where we were 2 weeks ago, when Jay Powell was giving his testimony to the House of Representatives and the Senate. The reason that's no longer the situation is, of course, the problems and the bank runs of a couple of small regional banks in the US. And Powell in his presentation said the effect of those bank runs is, and their uncertainty, is the same as further rate hikes. And that was the reason that some of the participants who thought that further rate hikes were necessary have decided, well, maybe not. So there are 18 people who are in the survey that do the summary of economic projections. These are members of the Open Market Committee plus bank presidents. And of those 18, 10 of them think that next rate hike will be the last rate hike. Okay. Now, as well as the uncertainty, however, of what's been happening in regional banks, the other thing that's been happening is the operation of an entirely new program, which was only invented in the last couple of weeks, precisely because of the instability in regional banks, and it's called the Bank Term Funding Program. And I just want to talk, I haven't spoken about that in the morning meeting, so I thought I might just talk a little bit about it and how big it is, because it's much bigger than most people appreciate. The Bank Term Lending Program offers loans of up to 1 year to banks, not just banks, saving associations, not just savings associations, but credit unions and other eligible depository institutions. In fact, basically everybody who's in the lending business, pledging any collateral eligible for purchase by the Federal Reserve in its open market operation, and such as US Treasuries, US agency securities, mortgage-backed securities, extremely importantly. And then it says, and these assets will be valued at par. That is to say, if you bought a US Treasury bond, a US 10-year Treasury bond at 8 basis points a couple of years ago, which was the lowest yield ever in history in the last 230 some years, that investment will be valued at par at face value by the Federal Reserve in lending money to that institution. That's really important, because that would have meant that a lot of the trouble in the regional banks that we've seen in recent weeks would not have happened, because they would have had this facility been in place a month ago, they would have been able to raise the cash and be able to satisfy their depositors, in my view. So that's really important. Now, how big is this facility, which is something they didn't mention? I've looked at the assets of the Federal Reserve, and you can look at that by simply putting in Google the word assets and then FRED, capital F-R-E-D, the Federal Reserve Economic Database. And what you'll see, there has been an amazing increase in US assets of $300 billion in the last week and a half. Now, what that means is that at the beginning of the year, the Fed balance sheet was $8.9 trillion US dollars, 8.9 trillion US dollars. And the Fed said it would run that down, the size of that down, and that was quantitative tightening. And in doing that, they had, up until 2 weeks ago, reduced the size of the Fed balance sheet from 8.9 trillion US dollars to 8.3 trillion US dollars. But this morning, it stands at 8.6 trillion US dollars. That is to say, half of that quantitative tightening has been given back to the banks. Now, there is a difference between the definition of what has happened under this facility and what quantitative tightening is. In quantitative tightening, you actually sell the product in the market, and that's bought by the Fed. But in this facility, the bank term lending program, you lend it for a period of 1 year. Now, of course, you could continue to roll over that period for a year after year, if you wished. So in practice, I think that the bank term lending facility is very similar in its effect on the market as quantitative easing would be. So what that means is that we've got something here creating credit in the US banking system, which most of the market isn't assessing. And it's very, very positive in terms of adding liquidity. And so whereas the Fed has said today that the crisis has the same effect as tightening monetary policy, I think that the bank term funding facility has the same effect as easing monetary policy. And I think the two cancel each other out. And I think that therefore generates continuing uncertainty of where the Fed funds rate really is going to go. But in terms of the people who are in the committee this morning making the decision, the biggest chunk of them think there will be only one more rate hike, and that one more rate hike happens in May.